All right, really excited to be here today on a Friday, right around noontime, getting a little bit of an early start on it today. But we're here for another book discussion. So every Friday, right around noon Pacific Standard Time, you'll see me discuss a leadership and management book. Today's book is It's Your Ship by Captain Michael Abrashoff. An absolutely fantastic book. It's a little bit obscure. You may not have heard about it. It came out a number of years ago, but it is just chock full of great leadership and management advice. It's my kind of book in that it is just full of practical things that you can really focus on and really implement into your day-to-day leadership work. Max, so good to see you here. So, really fantastic book. Before I dive into it, though, for those that are new to these book discussions, what I do in these books is I go through and I make little underlines, little takeaways, and then I review those with you on a weekly basis. And what I underline and my takeaways really are focused on how to implement these principles into day-to-day leadership work, or day-to-day leadership struggles that you might be facing. Give you a little bit of a push in that realm. So go ahead and, hey, Cindy, so good to see you here. So with that said, I did want to give a shout out. Next week, I will be on location up in the Bay Area, but I will be reviewing Lynchpin by Seth Godin, one of my favorites by Seth Godin, and his books are absolutely fantastic if you haven't checked those out before. So, Milena, good to see you here, and as we have some more people jump on, what I would like to say is if you have any comments about the book, if you've read the book before, by all means, dive in. I have no problem making this a discussion, but with that said, we're going to dive into It's Your Ship. The first kind of thing is I don't even get past the table of contents, because if you get through this book, what you'll find is that I'll give you a little bit of background on this. So Captain Michael Abrashoff, his first ship that he is given in the Navy is the USS Benfold, which is a destroyer. And it is an extraordinarily poor performing ship by any of the naval metrics. And what happens is over the course of 2 years, he turns that around into one of the best, if not the best, ship in the Navy. And so this takes you through kind of the journey on what he went through, what the ship went through, and all of the lessons learned, the things that he tried, all of that. So ton of stories, ton of practical application to all of this stuff. So it reads really well, flows very well, but is just full of a bunch of great stuff. So the table of contents actually houses some of what is, or where it was his advice to the captain that took over for him when his time on the Benfold was over. So his advice to the person that was taking over, and it forms the chapter headings here in many of the cases, is take command, be in command. It's your ship, tying into the title of the book. Lead by example, listen aggressively, and this is all really good advice. I know this is broad topics, but this is what you need to be focusing on as a leader. Communicate purpose and meaning, create a climate of trust, look for results, not salutes, take calculated risks, go beyond standard procedure, build up your people, and generate unity. Oh, and improve your people's quality of life. Those are kind of the 11 chapters, and those are the 11 pieces of advice that he gave for his successor on the ship. And it's good takeaway stuff. One of the big things that I was thinking about as I was going through this book this week was just how much work it takes. Listen, if you wanted to be a leader, if you wanted that promotion because you thought it was going to be easy, that you could kick up behind your desk with your feet up on there and just take it easy and, you know, sit back and watch everybody else work, that's not the way to being a great leader. That's not even the way to being a good leader by any stretch. If you want to be great, if you want that next promotion, it is going to take work and lots of it. He doesn't actually call this out in the book, but you just saw it over and over where he is going to bat, where he is going the extra mile for his ship, for his team, for his thought processes. He doesn't take no as a first answer in most cases that he describes in this book, and that takes that extra effort. It takes effort to look for ways to improve practices that are already good, that are already yielding positive results, and saying, you know what, we can probably do better. Let's find a way to do better. And so the work that is done here is absolutely extraordinary. And that was one of my big takeaways from the book, is that if you want to be a great leader, you have to be willing and ready to work the little bit extra. That's what's it's going to take to change things around, to make improvements. Every improvement that you make is a change. And so for those of you that struggle with change management or have a fear of change, realize that you have to get over that if you want to improve, because improving is change. So diving into it just a little bit here, what he found, and this is the introduction, kind of summarizing some things, and you'll see that he really pushed for empowerment and ownership with his team. To the contrary, I found that the more control I gave up as a leader, the more command I got. So the more control you give up, the more you empower your team, the more you are able to command. And one of the big reasons for that is the more that you empower your team to take on the little things, the medium-sized things, the more time you have to work on the big things. And that's the difference, control and command. He was commanding less things because he had given over control to the team. But what he was commanding was the big things. And that's what it takes to be a leader. That's what it takes to be a great leader, is giving up some of that control to work on your priorities and the really big things. Because too many times, those big important initiatives that we all have on our plates to do get pushed aside for all of the little mundane day-to-day stuff. And so you need to be able, where possible, to delegate, to empower and get yourself out of that little stuff so you can focus on that big stuff. Show me an organization, getting back to him, show me an organization in which employees take ownership, and I will show you a one that beats its competitors. One of my, I want to say, biggest sayings is that your employees hold the answers to almost all of your questions. As a leader, you may have questions. Why can't we improve this? Why can't we fix this? Blah, 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 blah. All of that. Your employees, the people that are on the front lines, have the answers to those questions. You just have to seek it out. And that's really the power of ownership. When people take ownership of their environment, they don't have to go to you with a question or with an approval. They just take care of it. And as long as your goals are all aligned, then that happens naturally, and you don't even see it in many instances. I asked everyone, so this is taking command. So this is now he's moved in. We're talking about being a leader in this case. And he assesses the Benfold right away and realizes it's not up to stuff. That the send-off that the prior captain received wasn't very good at all. Mark, so good to see you here. Glad you were able to join. So he assesses that initially, and instead of coming down, now he went through the Naval Academy. He's got plenty of leadership experience. He's been on other ships. He's seen other captains. All right, so he could have come in with his own ideas. All right, the ship's performing poorly. We need to get it up to snuff. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this and this and this and this. And I'm not saying that he didn't do some of that, but the main thing that he did is he asked every single sailor on that ship, is there a better way to do what you do? Is there a better way to do what you do? What if you went to all of your employees out there and you asked them that question? Is there a better way to do what it is that you do? Right? You will get some ideas right off the bat, but you'll also get people starting to think. And that's the thing that he was able to capture, is by consistently following that principle, by consistently following up with people on what it is that they were doing and whether there were improvements to be made. That thought process that took place initially started to bear some fruit. And so, yes, you might get you've got a staff of 10 people. You might get 2 or 3 ideas on how to improve their jobs if you ask that question of every single one of them face to face. However, if you keep asking that question or keep following up or keep implementing the ideas that you're receiving, you're going to get 2 or 3 more, and then 2 or 3 more. And all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road, you're getting constantly fed ideas on ways to improve. And it's a positive feedback loop. When your employees see that you are willing to get their opinion, willing to listen to the opinion, and then value it so much that you're going to actually put it into place, then that's an environment where they want to give you feedback, where they want to be looking for ways to improve the operation, because that's the way that they get the attention of their leader. Just a really important point. For those of you that tune into my live sessions, you'll hear it all the time. When you get a new position, Don't come in and change things up initially. Your first couple of weeks at bare minimum are all fact-finding, and you ask people questions. What do they see going right? What do they see going wrong? Where are their opportunities? Where are their problems? And how can I help you do a better job? You ask them questions, and then you take action on what they give you. When you do that, you foster a sense of ownership, and you create an environment where the status quo is something that you use as a foundation to leap towards further improvements. Now, moving into chapter 2, lead by example. So after you've taken command, after you've shown that you're the leader, then you lead by example. All right. If they see you fail to implement a policy, and this is so important, there's a lot. I really like the way that he did not shy away from dealing with your bosses. I mean, it's the Navy, it's a military organization, so there's a hierarchy, and he discusses some of the difficulties and some of the headbutting that went into dealing with his superiors and being able to get approval to take some of the measures that he wanted to put in place. But there's a ton of good stuff on bosses, so you'll hear me talk a little bit about that as they come up. But if they see you, talking about the sailors, your team, if they see you fail to implement a policy that you disagree with, they may think they have a green light to do the same to you. So this is that important thing. When your boss tells you to do something that you disagree with, it's on you to try to find the reason why they wanted it done that way. Could be a misperception on your part. But what happens is if you voice your disgruntlement with that decision, if you fail to follow through and your team sees that, what you've done is you've just made it okay for them to do the same thing to you. Well, I don't agree with what Cameron's saying, so I'm just going to do my own thing because that's what he did with his boss. All right, just an important point, almost a throwaway comment here at the beginning of this chapter, but an important point to make. The next one is actually a subheading. It's funny how often the problem is you. And I just kind of underline that. We look outside for so many problems, and we see this. I guess I'll draw the example for you of a bad boss that you had. All right, you almost all of us have had a bad, if not a terrible boss. Now, what I can tell you is that boss almost never thought that the problems in the performance of the organization was their fault. They thought it was your fault. They thought it was somebody else's fault. They thought it was outside. But it's oftentimes, if you're not getting the result as a leader that you want from your team, the problem is probably you. In some way, shape, or form, and I don't mean that necessarily in a derogatory term, that the problem is you. It may be that you need to find a different solution. That what you're doing is perfectly applicable in most situations, but doesn't work with your team. So you need to be flexible. If there is a problem in your organization, in your department, the first place that you want to look is to you and your behavior, your expectations, whether you're holding people accountable. Where are you falling short in those things? The big thing is, A, oftentimes that is the case, but B, that's what you control. That's what's so important about that, about looking inwardly. Again, referencing, my live Q&A sessions. A lot of times I'm going to tell you to take action when it is really totally the boss's fault. But you can't control what your boss does. Heck, sometimes you can't control what your employees do, but you can control what you do and what you're thinking. And so if you can take that ownership, then you can look to move forward. So I just like that. It's funny how often the problem is actually yourself. All right, so if you're going to lead by example, acknowledge that. If you're making a mistake, if there's something you don't know, I often recommend throwing it out to the team. Hey, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Or hey, I don't know how to do that. Does anybody have any thoughts on that or where I can get the answer for it? When you do those things, you teach your team humility. You teach your team that wherever they are, they're not expected to know all of the answers, that they're expected to grow into those answers because you're doing the same thing. Such a powerful point in leading by example is leading with your mistakes and with those things that you don't know. All right. Moving on into communicate purpose and meaning. So important. The whole secret of leading a ship or managing a company is to articulate a common goal that inspires a diverse group of people to work hard together. I'm going to say that again. I want to say most of these books, probably half of these books, you get a definition of leadership, and it's usually pretty profound. They vary slightly, but I like this one as well. The whole secret of leading a ship or managing a company is to articulate a common goal that inspires a diverse group of people to work hard together. So let me ask you, what is the common goal that everybody is working towards? Have you defined it? All right? Have you put numbers behind it? Have you talked about it on a regular basis? Because if you don't do those things, it's hard to inspire the teamwork that's going to help you actually get to those goals. So just a great point to be made there. Some leaders feel that by keeping people in the dark, talking about communicating purpose and meaning. Good. I'm glad, Cindy. This is, like I say, it's your ship. Dynamite. Whoop, moving to the camera there. It's your ship. Dynamite book. Really just chock full of good stuff. So talking about communicating purpose and meaning, one of the reasons that leaders don't communicate, and I call this out as a bullying tactic in my book, The 7 Deadly Sins of Leadership. And it's, some leaders feel that by keeping people in the dark, they maintain a measure of control. And the answer is they do. All right. I don't even think that something that they might maintain it. Or some leaders feel that that's what they're doing, whether they're doing it subconsciously or consciously. When you withhold information from your team, you are withholding power. Information is power. All right, so you're withholding power. You're withholding the ability for them to make their own informed decisions. And again, we see this a lot with our bosses. If you've had a poor boss, they usually didn't communicate particularly well because they didn't want to deal with your ideas or your thoughts. They wanted you to just be a yes man or yes woman in those cases. So important to realize that when you find yourself withholding information, ask yourself why. And a lot of times it is a method of maintaining power and maintaining control over others. Remember, right at the beginning of this, the more control that he gave up, the more command that he ended up having. All right? Control isn't the game. All right? That's not what you need. You need to be focused on results, which is a chapter that comes along a little bit later here. There was a direct relationship between how much the crew knew about a plan and how well they carried the plan out. Again, just almost a throwaway comment that he has in here, but it's backed up by leadership. When we talk about change management, one of the studies that I always bring up is one of the first studies in change management from 70 years ago. The big takeaway from that was the more involved people are in the plan, the more informed they are on the plan for change, the more they buy in and the better the results are that you get. And that's why it's important to convey that information. That information, hey, it comes at a price. You may need to explain yourself more. There may be some headaches that pop up, but in the end, you're going to get better results by communicating that information over. Not just in regards to, changing things up and working through a project plan or something along those lines, but empowering people down the road to understand where your decisions are coming from. That gets buy-in right away later on down the road as they build up trust in you. The crucial signal, so creating a climate of trust, transitioning here and talking about that. The crucial signal to the rest of the crew, you may screw up, but we believe in comebacks and we will help and not give up on you. If they see you intervene to help someone who is worth your effort, they will be reassured. Though the process is tedious and time-consuming, you will benefit if people feel more secure, are more willing to take risks, and have a positive attitude about the organization. So talking about when people screw up. I have an old saying, and he'll reference it again a little bit later on and kind of gets to it more directly, and that is, I had a rule when I was leading teams, and that was you can screw up on pretty much almost anything once. You get to screw up on anything you want to try once. It's the second time where we have issues. Now, of course, there are some issues you can't screw up on at all. Kaz, so good to see you here. But I wanted people to be free to, hey, mess up. And one of the big things is, why did they make a mistake? Were they making a mistake when they were trying to improve something? Or did they make a mistake because they're trying to, shirk away from responsibility or blame? Those mistakes that people made where they were trying something new, trying to improve things, I was all for those. They didn't get punished at all. They got celebrated for trying those things because that's what we needed to do. So just kind of talking about that climate of trust here and overcoming mistakes. You should never bring, and now this flips a little bit over to your boss and managing your boss. And this gets into a point that I've seen over and over again in these books, especially in regards to the military, and that is bringing small problems. All right. You should never bring petty problems to the attention of your boss if you can solve them yourself. All right. It was because I never complained about small problems that I was listened to when urgent matters came up. And I know I saw this, and I know you see this all the time, where there are those peers of yours that are always talking to your boss about every little update and every little thing that's going on and every little problem that they're dealing with and how they're dealing with them, even though they're obvious. All right. We all have those chatterboxes. They're praying for time. That's what they're looking for. All right. What you need to do is, and it's Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership, where he talks about this, where people will go on and on about the things that they're doing and the problems they're addressing. And it would get around to Jocko's turn and say, no, we're good. And he was, because he was handling it himself, getting at these petty problems. What happens is when you do bring up a problem, then at that point, then you've got your boss's attention. Well, now hold on, Cameron never has an issue. Well, what is this? All right. So you're managing your time and attention and focus of your boss. All right. That's the key to not bringing those problems. Don't be that chatterbox where you're just rattling off all the little mundane things that you're doing. That's not what those meetings are about. All right. They're for big things. And so if you don't have any big things to talk about, if you're handling all those little things, then that's a huge point, or that's something to just be silent about at that point. Nope, we're good. Maybe next week. All right, John. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it, John. I loved it. I read this book probably, man, I want to say 12 years ago. A boss of mine actually passed it on to me to read, and it has done nothing but just get better with age in this case. So continuing on in that climate of trust. In today's fast-paced world, rules should be treated as guidelines, not as immutable laws, unless they are truly critical. The gray areas, in fact, are one reason we need mid-level managers. And that last point was something I've never, ever heard before. And that is, you have the goals of the organization, and then you have the procedures. And what you find oftentimes is that those procedures actually inhibit you from getting towards the goals. We've all experienced this, and if you haven't, look around, because I'm sure you're experiencing it in some area. So the idea is that those rules that you have in place are guidelines, that there's flexibility with them. And as you get along in your career, you start taking a little bit more ownership, you get a little bit more confidence, and so you're willing to bend those areas a little bit. But it's that gray area where middle managers exist. If you could just put down standard operating procedures and people would follow them all the time in all situations. First of all, that standard operating procedure book would be about this thick to cover all of the different things. Then they wouldn't need any managers. They wouldn't need any leaders. I like to say, if things went right all the time, they wouldn't need any of us. All right, it's for when things go wrong, for when things aren't clear, for when it slips into that gray area that managers are so important. Just an interesting point that I hadn't heard articulated that way before. So getting back into creating that climate of trust. And so what he talks about here is he talks about basically taking one for the team, being the buffer between your crappy, arrogant, angry boss and your team. All right. I know I was put in that position many times. You may find yourself in that position now as well, where you are protecting and shielding your team. That's fine. Here's how he handled it. I knew what triggered his rage. So whenever I had to deliver bad news, I did it privately, where his ranting and raving would not spew out onto others, and I bore the brunt. When someone did something exemplary or did some exemplary work, I made sure he knew about it. When someone screwed up, I took responsibility for the error. So the key is understanding what are the triggers for your boss's outbursts, rage, anger. Again, lots of questions I get about dealing with angry bosses. All right, what are those triggers? How can you manage the situation so that you walk into their office and close the door so that yelling doesn't spread out? When somebody screws up, you talk about your role in that, not your team's role in that, because that's not going to be something that's going to be beneficial, is to get, torn apart by your boss's boss in those cases. But manage your boss and get clear on those triggers. That was one of the big takeaways for me, is getting clear on those triggers. Continuing on with trust. Helping your boss when he or she needs you badly is a pretty good investment. And that's oftentimes we look for excuses to not do the extra work, to not go the extra mile. In this case, it was sticking around in the Persian Gulf for 2 extra days. All right, whole different frame of reference than what we deal with often in our day-to-day work as leaders. But the boss needed him, so he was there. Chris, good to see you. Glad you were able to join. So we have those opportunities, and I'll actually take it one step further with these opportunities. You want to seek these out with your boss. You want your boss to trust you, that you're going to be there to help them. Now, yes, I understand that this often gets abused, right? But what I recommend is actually asking him, hey, is there anything you need help with working on? Phrase it a little bit differently than that. But ask them if there's anything going on that you can help with. Ask them if they need you for anything as a resource. Offer yourself up. That helps build that trust. And when you're there for your boss in those tough times, as he says, that's a pretty good investment. All right, that's good face time. That's something that builds up trust. And those people that are trusted by their bosses are often the ones that end up getting promoted, not for nothing. Moving on now for looking for results, not salutes is the name of the chapter here. I never once reprimanded a sailor for attempting to solve a problem or reach a goal. I'm going to say that again. All right, and I'll rephrase it. I never once reprimanded an employee for attempting to solve a problem or reach a goal. All right, so we talked about those mistakes and forgiving those mistakes, and especially when we talk about what was the motivation behind that mistake. Were they trying to take a shortcut or the easy route, or were they trying to fix something or improve something? All right. Never once reprimanded a sailor. You don't want to do that. You want to encourage that sort of behavior. Now, don't get me wrong. There's ways to coach that so you limit the downside as they're experimenting, that sort of thing. Empower your people and at the same time give them guidelines within which they are allowed to roam. All right. So what he's talking about in guidelines with that is it going to have a financial impact? Is it going to have some other, well, that's the translation for you. I'll let him speak for himself. All right. I called it my line in the sand. These were his guidelines. People had the empowerment to make decisions and to do things as long as they didn't need to inform him. I had to be in on any decision that could kill someone, injure someone, waste taxpayers' money, or damage the ship. Those were the 4 things. Those were his guidelines. If it wasn't potentially going to injure or kill someone, if it wasn't going to potentially waste money or damage the ship, then you had all the empowerment in the world to try it out. And that's what you should come up with in your organization, in your department. What are those guidelines? All right? And seed over that empowerment. Because what happens is if you don't do that, then people come to you with every little thing that they are doing looking for approval. Oftentimes people will do that even if you don't solicit it as just a way to cover their butts. All right, but come up with those guidelines and it makes it easy to empower your team. Talking about the universal trigger. So we talked about bosses and managing and looking for the triggers. All right, so in this case, he's talking about the triggers that will allow them to sign off on your idea. And again, big question I get is how to get my boss to listen to me. All right. A universal trigger, his words, not mine. A universal trigger is saving money. All right. If you want to get your idea across, tell your boss, show your boss how it's going to save the company or organization money. That is a universal trigger, and that's going to be something that is way more likely to get approved. So the real purpose behind whatever it is that you're looking to do may be to increase customer service or to increase employee satisfaction. But if you can show how those, not those 2 things, but how that change that you're looking to put in place doesn't address those issues, but saves the company money, that's going to be something that actually has a chance of getting across the finish line. So moving on into taking calculated risks. We've all heard this in some way, shape, or form before, but it's a good call out. And it, as I actually read this a second time, as I was preparing for the live session, it actually dawned on me that it had a little bit of a twist to it. Show me someone who has never made a mistake, and I will show you someone who is not doing anything to improve your organization. So I took that as a leadership role, but when I reread it, I realized that this is something that can be applied to employees. If you have an employee that has never made a mistake, then you have an employee there that instead of being fantastic is actually not even close to realizing their potential. It's only on the edges. It's only when you risk something that you make a mistake. All right, so challenge them to solve problems, to reach goals in new ways. All right, they may fail on, but challenge them in those particular areas, and just say, hey, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying something new. You're not improving the organization. Have that just transparent conversation with them. But I really like that as a little bit of a different twist on that. We know that if we're not failing, we're not improving. All right. Nobody learned how to walk without falling down. All right. So everybody internalizes that. But I never really thought of looking at babies that never fall down and say, wait, that one's not trying to walk. All right. And doing the same thing with your employees. A little forward planning. So talking about going beyond standard procedures at this point. A little forward planning can give you an enormous advantage. And kind of an innocuous sentence, but what immediately came to me when I read that is how many people are struggling with time management, or struggling under the burden of too many priorities. All right, your day gets away from you so quick. All right, everybody experiences it. You walk through the door and 15 minutes later you are off to the races because you've got 3 or 4 things that hit you all at one time, and you don't slow down until you leave. All right, even just a little forward planning can be huge as far as stopping a mistake. So taking 2 minutes to communicate clearly what it is that you want done in a situation could prevent you from having to clean up a mess for 30 minutes that gets created when something happens not the way that you wanted it to. All right, so even when you're in the midst of an absolutely crazy day, try to find those 1, 2, 3 instances where you can look ahead, all right? And you can plan ahead. And that hopefully gains you another 5 minutes down the road. And then you look for a few more, and that gains you 10 minutes down the road. And so it's all about corralling your day. When your day starts getting out of control, look for those opportunities to be able to plan ahead, because that's going to be the only way that you are going to get back on track, is by making things easier, not harder down the road. I'm talking about building up people. We delegated responsibility, so lots of empowerment. You hear that a lot in here. He's, one of the first things he does is ask every member of every sailor on the ship, how can you do your job better? What are ways that you could do your job better? What do you need to do your job better? All of those things, pushing it way down, all right? So empowering people. We delegated responsibility to people who were ready and able to accept it. One of the big problems with delegation is, A, you're delegating the wrong things. You're delegating things that are too big, all right? You need to start small. But the other thing is you're delegating to people that aren't most likely to be successful. Let me phrase it that way. So oftentimes what you'll do is you'll do a blanket delegation of a particular task. So now all of a sudden all 10 of your employees have to do this particular task because you've delegated it out. Sounds reasonable, sounds like you're following all good sound advice. The issue is a subset of those individuals isn't ready for it, isn't going to do well on it, hasn't had enough practice, doesn't have the empowerment or feel like they have the empowerment, blah, 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 blah. All right. The important thing, he delegated things to people who are ready and able to accept it. Delegate to your smartest, your best, your superstars. Start there. All right. In the case of something that you might want to delegate out to the entire team, start small. Start with your first 2, 3 people that take over for things when you're on vacation. Those that perform the absolute best, those who have asked for extra work, extra projects, extra exposure. All right, start with your best, then roll it out to everybody else after you have learned and honed the process. Delegation is a skill just like any other, and so it's often best to start small and build your muscles. You don't want to go into the gym and try to lift 400 pounds right off the bat. You have to build it. All right, delegation is the same way. So that was just kind of my takeaway on that small little comment that he made there. Get some water here. Big one here, building up your bosses. All right, again, I'm really thrilled that he didn't shy away from this particular topic. I aimed to be the consummate team player, a loyal servant to harassed bosses whose needs I would anticipate before they even realized that they had them. Oftentimes, we shirk responsibility. We don't put the work in until we're asked to do it. I decided what my bosses wanted more than anything else, and I think everybody can relate to this, what your boss wants is a really great department that's self-reliant. All right. I accomplished whatever needed to be done without being micromanaged to supply a whole series of fleet-wide, or in this case, organization-wide bests. All right. The best engineered ship, the best Tomahawk weapon provider, best search and seizure team, best retentions rate, and we would come in under budget. So what is it? Your boss, above anything else, wants you and your department to be self-reliant because they've got other things to deal with. Just the reality of it. So how can you anticipate their needs? How can you come in under budget? How can you provide bests over and over again? Best revenue increase, best profit increase, best customer service scores, all of those things. That's what your boss wants. And this gets back to one of the things I mentioned right at the beginning. This guy wasn't afraid to work. He was putting forth the effort. He was going for it every step of the way. And he wasn't avoiding any of the work, trying to manage that work. He was going full throttle forward with it. So just talking about managing your boss and building people up, that builds your boss up. We're not looking at credit here. All right? If your boss is successful, you will be successful. All right? If your boss isn't successful, your chances of being successful in an organization diminish, not increase. All right? Next comment here, the key to a successful evaluation, so building people up and talking to them, counseling them, coaching them. The key to a successful evaluation is whether or not your people are surprised the day you give them grades. I talk about this in my coaching sessions a lot about terminating employees. It shouldn't be a surprise that somebody is counseled in a particular way, that they're getting a write-up. By the time they get to the point of being terminated, they shouldn't be surprised that that's coming down the pipe. All right. However, take this to the next level, and when we talk yearly evaluation scores, they shouldn't be surprised by the scores that you are honestly giving them. If they are, then you are missing out on giving them proper feedback, timely feedback. That's on you, not on them. All right. So your team shouldn't be surprised. All right. They should see it coming, or at least have the mechanisms to see it coming. More than anything else, your people appreciate honesty from you. This is the information age. We are able to Google the answer to any question that we can come up with. All right. People want transparent information. They want you to be honest. If you're not over communicating with your team, you're not communicating enough with your team. So be honest with them. They will appreciate it. Even if it's bad news, they usually suspect the bad news anyways. And if you try to gloss over it, they're still not going to buy it. It comes across as disingenuous. Be honest and trust that your team is going to stand by you and stand with the organization through whatever those troubles are. Next, we only have like five more comments on this one. Again, good book and thick here. I think we've gone almost 40 minutes here. I wanted people, this gets back to it, we're generating unity and we're talking about mistakes again. I wanted people who screwed up on my ship to know two things. All right, getting into accountability on this one. All right, so if somebody screws up, everybody needs to understand that two things are going to happen. They will be appropriately punished, and second, they will get another chance. All right, again, back in my tenure, I could tell everybody you can make almost any mistake once. It's when you make it a second time that it's a problem. All right, so you will be held accountable. That's important for everybody else out there. That if you screw up, if you do something wrong, you will be punished, shall we say. But you will also get a second chance. And that's an honest second chance. Too many times as leaders, we give up on people way before they end up getting fired or before they end up leaving the company. All right, that's not what we're talking about here. Giving them an honest second chance where they still have your trust. Difficult, all right? I'm not saying it's easy, but it is certainly one of the stepping stones in a path of great leadership. All right. Improving people's quality of life. And I love that this is a chapter in here as we talk more and more. Again, this is an older book, so I'm just talking about work-life balance here, quite frankly. Having fun with your friends creates infinitely more social glue for any organization than stock options and bonuses will ever provide. It's the importance of having fun at work. All kinds of benefits to it, all right? Blowing off steam, that sort of thing. But one of the main benefits of it is that you have a shared experience, right? And that shared experience is what forms that glue that brings a team together just a little bit more. And so that's one of the main benefits of it is having fun creates more teamwork, creates more bonds, all right? It's not just another mundane day as we're sitting in the cubicles. We did something different today. Now, Akash, one of the secrets of getting promoted here, I'll actually go ahead and just tackle this really quick. First thing, let your boss know you're interested in being promoted. Have that discussion with them. Hey, just so you know, like the organization, I want to move onward and upward. If there's anything that I can do to help that along, any tasks that you have, projects you have that will help you, I'm more than willing to do those sorts of things. All right. Then I want you to look at those people that have been promoted in the past and what were their strengths. All right, really focus in on their strengths, not their weaknesses, and start working on those things. All right, those two things, that's what you really want to focus on. Not to get moved off of the book in this particular case, but I figured I could answer that one pretty quick there. Next comment here. Nowadays, the most effective managers, another great kind of synopsis of management and leadership. The most effective managers work hard at showing people how to find their own solutions. And then the managers get out of the way. Your role as a leader in the 21st century is to empower your team with the tools, with the skills, with the knowledge that it will take for them to solve their own problems. That lets you get out of the way and lets you work on bigger things. This isn't about you sitting behind your desk, feet up on the table, just chilling. All right. This is so that you can get to those high priority items that you don't necessarily have time to get to. That's what great organizations are doing. And that's why it's becoming more and more important to do that, because your competitors are often doing exactly that. And lastly, again, one I hadn't heard before, but one that I really like. The winning leader's first principle, optimism rules. All right, the winning leader's first principle is that optimism rules. You have to have optimism that your people can change, that the results can improve, that things can get better, that you are going to be able to find a way. You may not have confidence, should we say, but you will be able to find a way eventually as you change things, all right? Optimism rules, and the corollary is that opportunities never cease. Optimism rules, and opportunities never cease. That's a good thing to end on right there. So, with that said, lastly, It's Your Ship. Fantastic book. A little bit tougher to find. It's not one that is out there much and talked about anymore, but a ton of really good, really practical takeaways for frontline leaders to get into. Next week, I will be back up in the Bay Area, so we're taking this show on the road, and I will be talking about Linchpin by Seth Godin, one of my favorite books of his, and truthfully, any of Seth Godin's books are worth a read, but we'll check out Linchpin next Friday, noon Pacific Standard Time, and I will see you then. If you have any questions in the meantime, if I can be of any service at all, direct message me, email me, cm@cameronmorrissey.com. Happy to get back to you. Take care, everybody, and I will talk to you all next week. Thanks.